A new Wordle puzzle is online. Click on the link to play.
Listening to the following video may give you clues. Please like and share the videos.
Iconic comic book artist dies. Whether you're a fan of Batman or the X-Men, you've no doubt read an article about the life and career of Neal Adams.
The prolific artist helped form the Comics Creators Guild and drew Batman, Green Lantern, the X-Men, the Avengers, and many other famous characters. He also co-created some of the Dark Knight's most notorious villains.
But what was his contribution to the comics industry? Neal Adams was a comic book artist.
The late comic book artist, Neal Adams, is often called one of the most influential artists in the industry. He fought for better working conditions and creators' rights.
In the 1970s, he formed the Academy of Comic Book Arts, which advocated for the rights of writers and artists and hosted an annual awards gala. Sadly, the Academy dissolved in 1977 due to differences between its founders.
Neal Adams was an influential figure in the industry, and his work was hailed by filmmakers such as Guillermo del Toro and Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn. Adams' career spans over 60 years and was highlighted by his work on Batman and the X-Men.
He also championed artists' rights for decades and worked toward social relevance in his work. Adams' work is so beloved that DC Comics has made his name a household word.
While he was active in the comic book industry, his most memorable projects are Batman and Spectre. His acclaimed work on these books continues to inspire fans today.
In 1963, Adams teamed up with Stan Lee, another famous comic book creator, to develop a unique comic book. Despite the struggles, Stan Lee's success eventually led to the practice of receiving original work after publication.
This practice allows comic book creators to enjoy a second stream of income that they could not have otherwise achieved. Neal Adams exemplifies a commitment to artists' rights and the importance of their work.
In his later years, Adams was politically active in the comics industry. He fought to unionize the creative community of comic book creators.
These efforts eventually led to a modern industry standard in which creators are paid for original art. He also fought to ensure the Superman creators were awarded overdue compensation by DC.
And, after all, he had to fight Marvel. If you are looking for a rare comic book artifact, look no further than Adams. He helped form the Comics Creators Guild.
Adams, who had been working in the comic book industry for over 30 years, is best known for championing comic creators' rights. As a founding member of the Comics Creators Guild, he pushed for unionization and greater representation in the industry.
He also spearheaded efforts to ensure that Superman creators are properly credited and paid for their work. Adams' impact on the comic book industry extends far beyond Gotham City.
Born in New York, Adams' career began at Warren Publishing's Black and White horror magazines, where he worked with renowned artist Archie Goodwin. He made his debut as a penciler on Creepy 14 in April 1967.
After his success at Warren Publishing, Adams reapplied to DC Comics, but was turned down. He remained on the board of directors of the company for a decade, and eventually became one of the founding members of the guild.
Adams' first attempt to create a comic book guild failed largely because he was too arrogant. He had taken advantage of a rumor that comic book companies would pay thousands of dollars for a Tolkien book.
But in the end, his idea was not successful, as Marvel only achieved financial stability when it published a Star Wars adaptation. At the time, DC Comics was less than a month away from the DC implosion when Adams decided to organize fellow comic book creators into a guild.
After the comic book industry became more diverse, Adams' career took off. He drew comics ranging from soap operas to superheroes.
He worked on Batman, Spectre, and Deadman, among others. His comics also reflected his interests and reflected his eclectic tastes.
In addition to his work for superheroes, he created ghosts and other fantasy characters, as well as several genres. He drew Batman, Green Lantern, the X-Men, the Avengers.
The legendary artist died on April 28 in New York City from complications related to sepsis. His wife, Marilyn, and 3 sons survived his death, including son Josh, Jason, and Joel.
He also had a daughter, Zila. He is also survived by his 4 grandchildren, Kelly, Courtney, Jane, and Sebastian, and his great-grandson Maximus.
In addition to the X-Men series, Adams also contributed to Batman with his work. In the latter, he brought back Batman's darker roots and helped create iconic Batman villains, including Ra's al Ghul and Man-Bat.
In addition, Neal Adams' wife Marilyn and his 5 children survive him. Born in 1941, Adams began his career in New York City while still a college student at the School of Industrial Arts.
His early work on the Ben Casey newspaper comic strip launched his comic book career. Adams worked for both DC and Marvel, and his style and technique helped him stand out from the crowd.
He was one of the first artists to illustrate a scene featuring the Green Lantern and an old black man. He worked for several major publishers, including Marvel and DC, and drew cover art for several popular superheroes.
His work on Batman and Green Lantern included many key stories and comics, as well as co-creating 2 iconic villains. In addition, he also co-founded Continuity Studios and Continuity Comics.
Neal Adams' early career was in the world of black and white horror comics. After a brief stint as a freelancer at Warren Publishing, Adams returned to DC Comics to work as a penciler.
He was later assigned to the Batman comics by DC editor Julius Schwartz. Adams' pencils were highly praised and his work for the character led to a lengthy association with the character.
He co-created some of the Dark Knight's biggest villains. In addition to Batman's nemesis, Ra's al Ghul, Adams also helped create some of Gotham's most iconic villains.
These include the Joker and the Penguin, the 2 main antagonists from Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight film trilogy. In addition to the villains he created, Adams also reinvented many classic Batman baddies, including Two-Face and the Joker.
His take on the Joker helped bring the character back to his roots as a homicidal maniac in clown makeup and served as a model for the actor's portrayal of the villain on the big screen. Besides the movies, Adams also wrote several graphic novels about Gotham's other notorious villains, including Catwoman and Harley Quinn.
In addition to reviving the Batman character, Adams also helped revitalize the comic book medium. He worked closely with writer Denny O'Neil to bring the superhero back to his darker roots, bringing the Dark Knight to more serious territory.
Adams was also instrumental in helping Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel receive pensions and recognition for their contributions to the DC Comics canon. Additionally, he also contributed to such titles as The Avengers and X-Men.
In addition to co-creating many of the main villains in Batman, Adams also contributed to other notable DC characters. His work on the Batman series and the Green Lantern John Stewart have become well-known.
His Batman villains have also featured prominently in the movie and animated adaptations. While Adams initially worked in commercial advertising, his passion for comics led him to create some of the most memorable comics of all time.
He was a champion of creators' rights. The comic book artist and writer, who brought gritty realism to the superhero genre, has passed away.
Adams, 80, died from complications of sepsis on Thursday. His career spanned 6 decades, and he was known for his work on Batman and other DC characters.
He also championed creators' rights, and fought for social relevance in his art. In the 1970s, Adams was politically active in the comics industry.
He tried to organize the industry's creative community, which ultimately led to the current industry standard of returning original art to artists. This practice gives artists additional income from the sale of their work.
Adams also helped to lobby for the creators of Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. He led efforts to get them credit and some financial remuneration from DC.
In 1977, Adams illustrated a comic book that featured Superman and the other DC superheroes, whose story was written by Arnold Drake. The issue won an Ellie Award for Best Cover, and Adams went on to work on many other comics including X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man.
The artist also co-founded Continuity Studios with Dick Giordano and produced comics, commercial art, and storyboards. Adams had a profound impact on the comics industry.
He led the charge for better working conditions and ownership for comic book writers and artists. The Academy of Comic Book Arts was founded in 1970, and he was instrumental in its formation.
In the following years, the group evolved into the Academy of Comic Book Arts, but the Academy disbanded in 1977 after Adams failed to convince the two founding members to merge. In the meantime, his legacy lives on, and comic fans all over the world can thank Adams for his contributions to the comic book industry.